Greetings, English 304. I am so sorry that we were unable to meet together today because the readings that we had for today I find extremely fascinating, in part because they are so raw and complex and vivid, I guess you could say. So what I want us to start out talking about is the issue of blast, which was one of the seminal things about blast is, I think we could take from a quote from Ezra Pound, who is a famous English author, who says, "As for the 19th century, I think we shall look back upon it as a rather blurry, messy, sentimentalistic, mannerish sort of period." And Blast was trying to put into words this feeling and this idea. So one of the things that's really important to understand about Blast is that it was a journal that was meant to represent an ideology which was called Vorticism. And Vorticism is spelled Vorticism. And Vorticism has its roots in the Bloomsbury Group. The Bloomsbury Group is this really influential group of English writers and artists. We've talked about it before. Also with Cubism and Futurism. And so they were people who were really saying we're gonna turn our back on traditions and we're going to start things anew. And you can see this right here with the Cubism or the Cubist painting, where, you know, as opposed to this bust of Queen Victoria, which is very lifelike and real, the Cubist painting is looking at it's representing a way in which looking at the world can take on angles and be technological as opposed to natural. So one of the things that Vortism embraced was dynamism, and that is spelled Dynamism. And the fact that they were totally immersed in the machine age, and that things were modern, that things were not natural anymore, things were technical, things suddenly took on edges, and you can see that right in the Cubist painting. So they tried to capture movement in an image, and you can kind of see this here where we have apparently what seems to be a human figure doing multiple different poses. It's almost like looking at yoga or something. But that's what they were trying to do. So modern life is shown as this array of just like bold lines and harsh colors, and they also always were trying to draw the viewer's eye to the center of the canvas. And I think that's something that is interesting as well about the votarist, Vorterist movement. So there were only 2 issues of Blast. They were published in June of 1914 and July of 1915. And they really lost steam as an enterprise after World War I broke out. And that's part of why Blast is so significant, because it really captured this very specific time in space. All right. So the 2 main persons who were behind the Blast issues are Ezra Pound and Wyndham Lewis. And again, they only issued 2 issues. And basically the way that they looked at the the journal was that they were publishing a literary manifesto. So they wanted to throw down the gauntlet, which means they wanted to, basically challenge somebody to a duel. And this is what they were trying to express in their literature. So the subtitle of Blast is The Review of the Great English Vortex. And again, what they're known for is now known as the Vorticist Manifesto. My goodness, that is a hard word to say. So Vorticist, again, is spelled Vorticist. And the way in which they expressed this Vorticist Manifesto was in their choice of typography, in their design, and also their excessive language, as well as the oversized pages. You'll note that that they printed this magazine in what's called a folio size, and that's the largest size that magazines are usually printed in, and that's 15 inches by 12 inches. So it's much larger than what we would consider to be normal. So they were trying to express through their design, through the font that they chose, through the language that they chose, and even the size that they chose of their magazine, that they were doing something that was bigger than what has been done before. So here is the definition of vorticism. A, an activity as opposed to the tasteful passivity of Picasso. B, significance as opposed to the dull or anecdotal character to which the naturalist is condemned. C, essential movement and activity, such as the energy of a mind, as opposed to the imitative cinematography, the fuss and the hysterics of the futurists. And that quotation can be found in your textbook on page 2114. And this is the definition that they gave themselves. Again, I'm just going to restate it. Activity as opposed to the tasteful passivity of Picasso. B, significance as opposed to the dull or anecdotal character to which the naturalist is condemned. C, essential movement and activity, such as the energy of a mind, as opposed to the imitative cinematography, the fuss and hysterics of the futurists. And again, that's on page 2114. So basically what I've come to think that this quotation means, and what they're trying to express, is that vorticism was a violent corrective or war against what they viewed as the stultifying manners of English culture, and also artistic and literary conventions. So we've talked about this before, how in order for things to make sense, oftentimes what you have to do as somebody who's writing things down is to follow the conventions of what has been laid down before. And what Blast was trying to do, what Ezra Pound and Wyndham Lewis were trying to do, is say that we are going to not follow any of the past rules. We are going to carve a new path. And this is part of what makes reading their poetry so difficult. So part of what they did, and you have to admire their audacity on some level, is they decided that they would make their cover, which you can see here, a great magenta covered opusculus. And an opusculus is a collection of short literary works. And so again, just to remind you that with the modernists, one of the really defining characteristics is that they are going for very high literary art. They're going for a audience of people who are extremely educated. And so they use words that the layman or the ordinary person would not know. So again, they described this cover as the Great Magenta Covered Opusculus. And so that kind of summarizes up very clearly and succinctly the way in which they were trying and aiming for an audience of very few people. Now, Ezra Pound is also quoted as saying, "This image is a radiant node or cluster, a vortex, from which and through which and into which ideas are constantly rushing." And again, what I think is the most important thing to take away from this quotation is that there's a real emphasis on the mind and on the intellect and on the fact that perhaps people are not being defined or could or should not be defined by their physical actions, but by their mental strategies. And this is very modernist. So this quotation is emblematic of the modern art movement in general. And this edition of Blast, the two editions that came out, they are seminal texts of 20th century modernism. They really sort of set the tone for what other people were going to try to copy in order to be on the cutting edge. So in order to really understand Blast, one thing that I think is crucial is to recognize how self-contradiction is fundamentally a strategy of the journal and of the authors. So what we have is this contrast between what is blast and what is blessed. Okay, so what is blast is what needs to be denounced or to do away with. And you'll see that what comes up over and over again is that what needs to be blasted is the British climate and the snobbish sort of aesthetic sensibility of like what's pretty is good. Again, this is a reaction against the art for art's sake movement. Also, what is blast is French sentimentality. What is blast is professionals and amateurs. What is blessed is humor and sport. What is blast is the middle classes, the aristocracy, and the proletariat. So you can see that this is a real sort of like anarchy. It's a call for anarchy. And it's a call for anarchy because the authors seem to have decided that there's nothing that can be saved within culture. Okay? So what is blessed, on the other hand, is France, hairdressers, the battle against nature, as with below as well, English ships, ports and seafarers, humor and people. So again, just to really emphasize this, is that what they are advocating is contradictions. Okay? So they bless the exact same things that they blast. And I think that what we're supposed to take away from it is that you can see bad in something as well as you can see good in something. And they want us to question what we're seeing good in and what we're seeing bad in. Now, here is a quotation from page 2121, which is the blast humor, quack English drug for stupidity and sleepiness, arch enemy of real, conventionalizing like gunshot, freezing, supple, real and ferocious chemistry of laughter. And again, what I think we need to take away from this is the emphasis on the individual, that what we've been taught by our culture, according to the modernists, is something that we need to question, and that what we need to rely upon is our own individual minds. And again, this creates a real conundrum for those of us who have bought into convention and are now taught to rely on our own minds. So, all right, this is the end of this video. I will start